Geno Smith is throwing the ball as good as any quarterback in the NFL.
Here comes Hines again to the end zone for Damar Hamlin. This is storybook. And on first down, Saquon Barkley to the sideline. And here comes the speed.
I'm proud of you guys for the way you handled this week. I am. And, listen, you're AFC South champs, baby.
Don't call it a comeback.
What's up, everybody? We're going to break the format a bit today because my co-host Dave Dameshek is out. But we got Trey Wingo from Pro Football Network and Half Forgotten History. What's up, Trey?
Oh, Ryan, how are you, man? So good to be with you on Don't Call It a Comeback. And who better to host this show than you, considering your career. Can't wait to get into all the great stories about the 2022 season when it talks to comebacks in the NFL.
All right, let's get this rolling. From Wondery, I'm Ryan Shazier, and this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
All right, so let's get into this NFL regular season. There's so many comeback stories this year, but now they're officially over. So I want to start off by talking with you, Trey, about the Seattle Seahawks. They were supposed to be tanking when they traded Russell Wilson, but I feel like Geno Smith had other plans. Like, what do you think happened over there?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Geno absolutely has an amazing comeback story. He set the single-season Seahawks passing record, took that away from Russell Wilson, was completely accurate with the completion percentage all year long. But what's really interesting to me about this one, Ryan, is I don't think even the Seahawks expected this. Because when they traded Russell Wilson away, they asked for a quarterback in return. The kid, Drew, out of Missouri. So, when they made the trade, they wanted Drew Lock in the deal. You don't ask for Drew Lock in the deal when you have Geno Smith and you think Geno Smith is going to do the things that he did for Seattle in the regular season. So kudos to Geno for not only doing what he did, but if we're just being honest about it, this was not what the Seahawks were planning at all. If they had that level of confidence in Geno Smith, they never would have asked for Drew Lock back in the deal. By the way, they wanted him in the 2019 draft, and some of you might not remember, that's the year that Russell Wilson, out of the blue, decided he wanted a contract extension by April because he heard that they were going to think about drafting Drew Lock in the draft in 2019. So he wanted to put some pressure on them to get a deal done. So that's why that deal was done when it was done. So this whole thing with Geno makes it even better because Seattle has been really hot on Drew Lock for a long time. And Geno's like, those are not my plans. And he played great. I couldn't be prouder of Geno Smith.
To me, it's so crazy because now what decision does Seattle have to make? I think they still have the third or fourth pick, so they can still get one of those top-tier guys. But I feel that Geno Smith is a shoo-in to win Comeback Player of the Year. Do you think that somebody can take it from him?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to get comments about Saquon Barkley and a couple of other players. And quite frankly, there's a guy that no one talks about. It's the Giants offensive lineman, Nate Collins, who smashed his leg in September 21. It was a 45-degree angle. He had to go through 8 surgeries. There was compartment syndrome in his leg. There was an infection. For him to come back and even see the field was remarkable, which he did after week 8. So good for him. But no, I think Geno is absolutely the story. And not only did he do what he did, but he beat every single team that he used to play for during the season. So that's the cherry on the sundaes. Not only did I do what I did, not only did I take us into the postseason after missing it last year, but oh, by the way, I also check all the teams that decided to pass on me. I think it's Geno's award for sure.
No, to me, the reason I love this comeback story, and we talked about this one multiple times this year, is because as a previous player, a lot of people that don't play in the game always like, oh, this guy isn't good, this guy sucks, this guy is trash. And I know Geno Smith probably got a lot of that when everybody claimed him a bust when he was at the Jets. And to me, it just shows how good everybody is technically in the NFL. If they're in the right scheme, the right system, the people, once they start playing well, people start believing in them. Man, I think pretty much not everybody in the NFL can have a breakout like this, but I feel majority of guys, if they're in the right fit, things can pan out for them.
Oh, you're 100% right on two levels. One, you have to be receptive to the coaching, and you have to be understanding of your situation. And quite frankly, that's something that I think Zach Wilson is struggling with in New York right now. He's, being quarterback isn't just about throwing the football. It's about understanding your teammates, reaching your teammates, reacting to your teammates, communicating with your teammates, understanding your role as the quarterback, as the lead person in the entire organization. And I think those are some of the things that Zach is struggling with in New York. And quite frankly, those are things that Geno struggled with a little bit in his career earlier. Remember, Ike Empanala broke his jaw when they got into a fight over a football camp that Geno did or did not show up for and did not reimburse people for and all that kind of stuff. So, it's the maturation process for Geno. And the ability to understand the situation. And Pete Carroll has done an amazing job with him. And, he's not going to I don't think he's going to get the Coach of the Year award, but he has to be in consideration for it. Geno was in the right place at the right time with the right frame of mind, with the right coaching. And those all things came together. And it's been really a fun story to watch because, I think he started 29 of 32 games his first 2 years. And then he started like 4 before this year, and for him to do what he did this year after being so far away from being a consistent starting quarterback, it's absolutely testament to his will, his determination, his acceptance of the situation and the coaching he got.
Yeah, that's just an amazing story. I think that's why we decided to lead off with it today. And I know we didn't really talk much about this one, but to me, the Seahawks, their plan in their front office were probably thinking, hey, we're going to get a good pick. We have Geno and, move on. To me, I'm trying to figure out what decision that their front office is going to make now, because when you have somebody that, is a Pro Bowler, a comeback player of the year, and then you have shiny toys coming out like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Will Levis, what is their role as a GM? What are you thinking when your team does a lot better, probably differently than you planned?
Yeah. Well, here's the way I would look at it. I mean, Geno's only 32, right? He'll be 33 next October. And you see, Aaron Rodgers playing. Who knows where he's going to play next year, but still playing. Yeah, right. Tom Brady is 45 and still playing. Drew Brees played till he was 40. So if you got this out of Geno this year, you have to think realistically. He can probably play at this level for another 3 or 4 years, and then you make that decision. And it would really it would be the most Geno Smith's career thing ever if they did decide to move on from him, because everybody has decided to move on from him. But I think he's earned the right. I think he's earned the respect of that organization, and more importantly, earned the respect of those receivers in Metcalf and Lockett. I think there's a lot of reasons to keep what you have intact because it's working. It's really, really working.
So to go from one team that everybody thought was going to tank to one team that they didn't tank on purpose, but they actually had a terrible season last year, going 3-14 last year, the Jags. They went from worst to first. Do you feel like we're scratching the surface on how good this team can be?
I do. And I think it becomes a testament to two things. Testament to Trevor Lawrence being the player we all thought he was going to be, was the number one pick in 2021. And if we're being honest about it, real coaching. Like I know that Urban was your guy at Ohio State, but he's a good college coach. He was not a good pro coach. Like that's not a knock on Urban as a college coach. He was terrible as the coach in Jacksonville. Doug Peterson is a real NFL coach. I mean, let's just be honest about it. He won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback against Tom Brady, who, by the way, if you look at the numbers for Super Bowl 52, best numbers for Tom Brady in any Super Bowl. He threw for 300 yards in the first half, threw for almost 500 in the game, and they put up 33 points, and they still found a way to win. So you have a real head coach in Doug Peterson getting a real talented quarterback to find his potential. And I think, Ryan, it was the game in London that the Jags lost, and Trevor threw a bunch of interceptions. He's like, I can't be this bad. I've got to figure out what I'm doing wrong. And from then on, it really the switch really flipped. And the best showing I thought for Trevor and the Jags all year was the game they went into SoFi and just pounded the Chargers. I think it was 38-10, and now they get them in the postseason at their place. So I think Jacksonville has a lot of interesting pieces in place. People laughed when they gave Christian Kirk that contract. Christian Kirk proved to be a very, very solid receiver. I question taking Travis Etienne in the first round when you had Robinson, who was an undrafted player, as a running back. And I'm still not a big guy about taking a running back in the first round. But Etienne, after a slow start, because he missed all of last year, a slow start to the season, really has come on strong. So you have a franchise quarterback. You have a wide receiver that he trusts. You have a running game, and you have some really interesting pieces on defense, like the kid Rayshon Jenkins, who's just been a baller out there. I think Jacksonville is going to be squarely in the mix for the next few years.
Oh man! So with you saying that, do you feel with them having Urban, it hurt this team much?
Yeah, I mean, I do.
No, I mean when I mean like building the team wise, not just the team.
Okay. You mean did Urban's season in or half season, whatever, in Jacksonville hurt the team from being built?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was. There's the way you deal with men, and there's the way you deal with kids. And Urban tried to deal with men the way he dealt with kids, and it just did. Look, I mean, God bless him, Tim Tebow. All right, loved him, and he had an opportunity last year, and Urban gave it to him. Everyone knew Tim Tebow couldn't play in the NFL. Arguably one of the greatest college football players of all time, if not the greatest college football player of all time. But he hadn't played in, 5-6 years, maybe even longer, and now you're going to convert him to a tight end, a position he's never played. You saw what happened in that first preseason game when he was out there. I mean, like, those kinds – you know this, Ryan, as a former – players know whether or not you can play, right? And when it would have been one thing to give Tim Tebow a tryout for the Jags. It's another thing to offer him a contract and sign him to a contract when he'd been out of the league for that long and is trying to play a different position. Then he brought in the strength coach from Iowa who had to be let go at Iowa because of some issues with the players, specifically players of color. All of that contributed to nobody really trusting Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, and I think it did slow down the progress. And then you bring in Doug Peterson, who knows how to relate to these players, who knows what these guys are as men, and they had some pieces, and he was able to put those pieces together into a cohesive team.
So do you feel that with Doug Peterson winning with Nick Foles that he can do the same with Trevor Lawrence, a championship?
I think that Trevor Lawrence is a much better quarterback than Nick Foles, for sure. I mean, I love Nick. I want to be clear, in Philadelphia. Okay? Nick Foles in Philadelphia is excellent. The first year with Chip Kelly, when he was the coach there, I believe Nick set the record for the touchdown-to-interception ratio that year, 27 touchdowns, 2 picks. And then he went other places, and he wasn't good. And then he went back to Philadelphia and won a Super Bowl. Like, Nick Foles in Philadelphia is as good as Trevor Lawrence is ever going to be. Nick Foles outside of Philadelphia is never going to be as good as Trevor Lawrence is going to be in Jacksonville.
No, that makes sense. I like that a lot. I think Trevor is one of those guys that's a generational talent. At first, last year, he was up and down, but just the way that he's leading this team, coming back down from having 3 wins at the beginning of the season to winning your division, it's just a testament of how good of a player he is.
Right. Well, just look at what you talked about with coaching, right? It's coaching and fit. I mean, why was Tua so much better this year? Because suddenly he has Tyreek Hill on one side and Jalen Waddle on the other. Why did Jalen Hurts explode this year? Because not only does he have Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders, oh, by the way, let's get in A.J. Brown, right? When you surround a generational talent at quarterback, which I believe Trevor Lawrence is, with all the right pieces, you're going to have success. And by the way, if Trevor Lawrence had been a bust, everyone should reevaluate drafting and evaluation of draft talent, right? Because he checked every box. And if he was going to, I said all along, if Trevor Lawrence didn't work, I think it's an indictment of the Jags more than it's an indictment of Trevor Lawrence as a player. And I think now we're seeing that come to fruition with the way this team has sort of gotten together.
Yeah, from high school, people predicted this with him. So I'm actually happy to see it. So the Vikings had 8 comeback wins this season, including the biggest one in NFL history.
Yeah.
But nobody believed in them. Should we?
No. I mean, I love, look, kudos to Kevin O'Connell. He's done a great job. And Captain Kirk, amazing. And yeah, you want to be, your record and your season is usually defined by how you fare in one-score games, right? And they've been great at that. But they lost to the Cowboys 40-3 in their building. They went up to Green Bay and got stomped 41-10 or 41-17, whatever it was. Then, like you said, they had the greatest comeback in NFL history. There's no other team that was going to blow that lead than the Indianapolis Colts this year, who are an absolute mess. And Jeff Saturday's a friend of mine. I love it, but that game drove me crazy. I was like, why are you punting with 15 seconds left on the clock? The clock is the enemy, not the Vikings. The clock is the enemy. So, I mean, they had that amazing comeback, and it was great. I tip my cap to them for sure. But if you're asking me, do I trust them to play San Francisco or Philadelphia? Because they're going to have to probably go through one of those teams to get to the Super Bowl. I would be squarely on the side of Philadelphia and San Francisco in that matchup. I'm
going to be honest. I don't even know if they're going to get out of the wild card.
Listen, the Giants played them tough. Now, again, they won that game. I would expect Minnesota to win that game because their biggest flaw is what? Their pass defense. They're terrible. I think they're DFL in the league. So in passing defense, that's not what the Giants do well. The Giants like to run the ball with Saquon and Daniel Jones, quite frankly. But yeah, it would not shock me if the Giants found a way to win that game. I agree with you.
I think I might have to agree with you. I'm actually going into the game thinking the Giants are going to win. I won't even be surprised. So let's talk about the biggest comeback story of the season. We have a ton of good news about Damar Hamlin this week, which is awesome. He's been released from the hospital, headed back to Buffalo. You covered all type of stories in the NFL. Why do you think
including
this one
yours,
stuck out?
Including yours, Ryan?
Yeah. What do you think is different about this one?
Well, people don't know this, but we actually have had a player die on the field before. It was a wide receiver for the Lions in 1971, and he caught a pass and then went to the sidelines and collapsed on the sidelines and died because the tackle loosened a blood clot somewhere in his body, and it got into his lungs and heart. So, we have that happened before, but I don't think it had ever happened in a primetime game with the world watching and the Bills and the Bengals. And, the reaction of the Bills players, his teammates, was very similar to me of the reaction to your teammates when they saw what happened to you in that game. It was all the emotions were just laid out for everybody. And, I'll never forget the look on Josh Allen's face when he was realizing what was happening. And, what I think what captivated that story for a lot of us is that, we couldn't see what was going on because the players were all around Damar. They all got together and would not let the camera. Normally, the cameras see everything before the players see everything, right? But in this scenario, it was the players who realized and understood the gravity of the moment before anybody else did. And I think that sort of caught everybody by surprise. It's just the idea that he had to be resuscitated on the field. And I think that, and you can speak to this as well as anybody, people don't know how many levels of protection and medical response is available at every NFL stadium. And, Dr. Jeff Ellis, who's a guy that's been involved with the NFL, he was at the Euros in 2021, the European soccer tournament, when the Danish player, I think his name was Christian Eriksen, also collapsed on the field and had to be resuscitated. And Jeff said, he was watching that, and he said, we need to have those protocols in place at NFL stadiums. And they do have that now. I mean, those athletic trainers revived Damar Hamlin on the field. And I think you should share this, Ryan, because you know this better than anybody. The response team on the field saved Damar's life, but how close that stadium is to a level 1 trauma center in downtown Cincinnati, I think helped regain all the life that he's going to have, right? I think that stadium is closer to a level 1 trauma unit than any other stadium in the NFL.
Yeah, I could completely agree because most of the stadiums aren't really downtown like Cincinnati's is. And the University of Cincinnati Hospital is phenomenal. I've obviously gotten care there. And when something happened to Tua, I even said, hey, it's a good thing he's going to that hospital system.
Right.
And when I seen the same thing happen to Damar, I was thinking about the same situation. I was like, at least he's at such an incredible hospital. And one thing that's kind of crazy to me is that I heard that the doctor that initially saw me was the same doctor at the hospital that saw him as well. So it just,
crazy.
to me, it's so much things that put our stories together, but it just tells you the type of care that the NFL is doing to make sure that the players are in the best care as possible. And that we've seen all that at that moment on Monday night.
Yeah, and I just want to say regarding your situation, it really your injury really affected me, and I think I told you this when you were on the Half Forgotten History podcast episode with me, because my son played college football at Georgetown, and one of his college teammates was a kid named Tyrell Williams, who was playing in St. Francis against St. Francis in Pennsylvania, and just made a tackle, and it was an ordinary tackle, and somehow he ended up landing on his head awkwardly, and he was paralyzed on the field, and he's made a lot of strides. He actually was with a walker and some help was able to walk across the stage at Georgetown University and get his degree. But knowing what my son went through with his teammate, your injury affected me more than anybody because I'd seen it, and I'd known it right away, and I got a bunch of players like J.J. Watt and Richard Sherman to send Tyrell, notes, positivity. It happened a year before or 2 years before your injury. And so, your story is always one of my favorites because of that. And just, to see you walk across the stage at the draft in Dallas and everything that you've done since then has just been really remarkable.
No, thank you so much, Trey. And to me, I just, first of all, I have to give a testament to God. I'm a believer in God, but it's a lot of hard work and just a lot of, push. But I think for me, and even Damar could probably say the same thing, is just that we have so much support, and it's almost like we couldn't do bad because how many people just put love on us to make us get better. And
Right.
So I think that allowed, me and Damar to be able to overcome this, and just the willingness to fight.
Don't call it a comeback.
So this is an incredible comeback season for running backs as well. So I know we talked about Saquon a little bit earlier, but we have Christian McCaffrey, and we have a few more that return to form as well. Which running back surprised you the most with their comeback this season?
Well, just on a bigger picture, Brian Robinson, obviously from the Washington Commanders, shot in the leg, and for him to be able to come back and do what he's done is just remarkable. The McCaffrey thing is fascinating to me because, on a couple of levels, because once he left, Carolina started running the ball better, which made no sense to me. But if you look at their numbers pre the trade and post the trade with Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard and a bunch of other guys, Carolina Panthers ran the ball really, really well. But I think that was the move of the entire season. That was the trade in season that changed everything, because the Niners were 3-4 at the time of the trade, or right around there. And then they lose one game when Christian McCaffrey just got there against the Chiefs. And once Christian became a starter, they closed the season on a 10-game winning streak. And you put a running back with Christian McCaffrey's talents and Kyle Shanahan's offense. I mean, Kyle Shanahan has made a lot of running backs you've never heard of a lot of money, with the way he operates that zone rush. McCaffrey, to me, was the move of the year. And for him to come back and beat Christian McCaffrey because you know this as a linebacker, you always say, hey, running backs are good until they get hurt, right? Yeah. And they're all going to get hurt. And then what happens when they get hurt? Well, McCaffrey had 2 straight seasons of being hurt. And he's a guy that's he's muscular and thick, but he's a little on the smallish side. So you're thinking, okay, hey, good for him. He had, 8th overall in 2017, had 4 or 5 really good years. That's kind of the way it goes. But for him to come back and do the things that he did and just be the perfect fit in that offense, I think is absolutely remarkable. I mean, there was a stretch this year for the Giants over a 4-game span or a 3-game span where Daniel Jones actually had more rushing yards over that time frame than Saquon Barkley. So the Saquon story has been wonderful, and he's been good, but I think the consistency that we've seen from Christian McCaffrey in that offense, to me, really stands out.
I think Kyle Shanahan did a really phenomenal job with Christian McCaffrey in just the offense, because in Carolina, it's basically it was the Christian McCaffrey show. It's like they just for us to win, Christian has to touch the ball almost 40 times. And with him being on the smaller side, touching the ball 40 times is almost unrealistic. But now with them having so many weapons there in San Francisco, it allows Christian to understand, hey, I don't have to score a touchdown every play. I just have to do the best I can and try to get the most out of it. And then, they'll spell me with another running back. We have George Kittle. We have Ayuk. We have weapons. The quarterback's playing well. So I think Christian McCaffrey this season, just with the help of all the pieces that surround him, allow him to feel more comfortable in that area.
Well, look how much better Kittle was after the trade, right? If you go through the first half of the season, look at Kittle's numbers, and you're like, not a lot there. So then suddenly you have to account for McCaffrey, and then Ayuk, as like you said, very smartly, has come on and really elevated his game this year. You have Debo in the ways they want to use him, but then you add McCaffrey into the mix, and suddenly, well, how are you going to stop all of them, right? How are you going to stop Kittle and stop McCaffrey and worry about Ayuk over the top and all the crazy ways that you kind of fit Debo into the offense? George Kittle is the beneficiary of Christian McCaffrey as much as anybody when you look at his numbers since the trade. And the other thing that's really interesting to me about San Francisco, and I think as a former Steeler and a linebacker, you can appreciate this, they play hard. They play physical and fast. My favorite stat of the year when it comes to San Francisco, and McCaffrey's a big part of this. Every single team that played the 49ers and then played a game the next week lost. Everybody that played the 49ers went on to lose the next week. The only team that won their next game after playing the 49ers was the Kansas City Chiefs. But the Chiefs had a bye week in between. And it still took them overtime to beat a Malik Willis-led Tennessee Titans team at Arrowhead. So the San Francisco 49ers with McCaffrey on offense and Trent Williams, that offensive line, they beat you up. And I was talking to Robbie Gould the other day on something that's going to come out in a little bit. And I said, how aware were you guys of that? And he said, well, we heard about it, halfway through the season, didn't really think about it. And then the last 3 weeks, we're all like, really? Nobody's won after they played us? They took pride in that. And the 49ers are just so physical. And McCaffrey and that offensive line are a big part of that. They literally take something out of you that you don't have the next week.
That's crazy. So they go on a 10-game winning streak, and then literally the team, after they play them, loses another game. So that means pretty much everybody loses.
0-15. The next week. The only team to win their next game was the Chiefs, but they had a bye week. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
That's crazy. So now it's time to talk about the GOAT. I don't know how he figured a way to do it. I don't know if he paid everybody in the NFC South not to have a good record, but Tom Brady's back in the playoffs. Do you think we'll be able to see the GOAT play at a high level again or not?
I do. Look, I think that they've been sort of off all year, right? But when they had a chance to close the deal, what did they do? They closed the deal. They took care of business. Because Carolina, amazingly, remember going into that Week 17 game, controlled their own destiny as well. If Carolina had found a way to beat the Bucs for a second time and then gone on to win the final week of the season, then they would have been the NFC South champs. So they just came short in that game against the Bucs. They're playing the Cowboys this week, right? And go look at the numbers for the Dallas Cowboys when they play outdoors on grass during the season. They lost in Philadelphia. They just lost this past week in Washington. They lost in Jacksonville. Now, they did win in Tennessee, but that was a Tennessee team that was in the middle of they closed the season on a 7-game losing streak. 7-game losing streak. And that was Joshua Dobbs, as you know, your former teammate in Pittsburgh, Joshua Dobbs' first ever NFL start. So the Cowboys are not good outdoors on grass. And whatever the best version of the Bucs is, that's what they're playing right now offensively. You still have Mike Evans, who once again got to 1,000 yards, the only player in NFL history to do it, I think, the first 9 seasons of his career. The running game is getting a little bit better, but you have Gage now and Godwin. I think the receiving core in Tampa Bay is as healthy and as deep as it's been all year. And suddenly that rookie tight end, Otten, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name. He's playing really well for Tom, and we know how much Tom likes tight ends. So I think if I'm the Cowboys, if you're a Cowboys fan, I'd be a little concerned heading into this game because you had everything to play for in Week 18 in Washington. You came out flatter than day-old beer.
So I'm going to say this. I don't count Tom Brady out of anything anymore.
Never.
Yeah. So
why would you? Why would you?
Right. It's no moment that's too big for him. To me, with somebody with 19 division titles, 7 Super Bowls, 20 conference championships, I think I have to. I'm gonna have to just go with him. I can't go with the Cowboys with the way they've been playing football lately.
Well, not only that, but the Cowboys, just look at their recent postseason history. It's like, hey, you guys are good until the postseason. You know, I mean, they've got to prove they have that breakthrough win. I think Dak has won one playoff game a couple of years ago. And, you know, I'm not a big believer in wins and losses as a quarterback stat. I've said that a million times. Teams win games, teams win championships, but quarterbacks have to play well. So, you know, the Dallas Cowboys need to put to bed a lot of ghosts that they're bringing in into the postseason. They need to prove that they can actually play a complete game, coach a complete game, quarterback a complete game, manage a complete game in the postseason.
Don't call it a comeback.
All right, we have a few more quick comeback stories with Trey Wingo. So, my guy, Coach Tomlin, finished 9-8. That makes his 16th straight year without having a losing season in the National Football League. I have to make sure people understand it's the National Football League. This isn't college. This isn't high school. Where do you rank Coach Tomlin among the active coaches?
He's top 3. I mean, he's top 3 in any way you want to shake it. Look, he probably won't win Coach of the Year, but I'm not sure he shouldn't. This was his best coaching job ever because the hardest thing to do is make that transition, right? He has a Hall of Fame quarterback all those years in his career, Ben Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger got there in 2004. Tomlin took the job in 2006. And, you know, he's been sort of had the luxury of having stability, even though he's had to go through years. You know, he won games with Duck Hodges, okay? Like, don't ever doubt Mike Tomlin as a head coach. This was by far, to me, his best coaching job and a real testament to the culture he puts in place in that locker room that you can speak to better than anybody. I mean, at one point, they were, 2-7? They're 2-6, some ridiculous number.
2-6.
And for them to finish with a winning record, and again, people need to understand, no one has ever done this in the NFL before. No one has ever gone through their first 16 seasons as a head coach and never had a losing record. Not Bill Belichick, not Chuck Noll, not Tom Landry, not Don Shula. It doesn't exist. So he's done something that has never existed before in the NFL. And to do it when he's bouncing back and forth from Mitchell Trubisky to the rookie Kenny Pickett to having all kinds of issues, the ability. Najee Harris was not good at the start of the year, then realized, oh, I'm Najee Harris. I should be better than this, and got him going. This was Mike Tomlin's cherry on the sundae of his coaching career, and I can't say enough good things about the things he was able to do. As a former player of his, what is it about him that he gets the most out of players so much?
I think he does a great job of recognizing your talent, but then also still making you feel important. A lot of times coaches and leaders, you know, it's so much about the team, but it's only about the team. Sometimes it's not about the individual. And Coach Tomlin does a good job of coaching the individual to let them know how important the team is. So
wow, that's very cool.
It's kind of hard for me to say it, but I know like Nick Saban, it's about Alabama, the brand of Alabama. And to me, I feel Coach Tomlin does a good job of understanding Ryan Shazier and Ben Roethlisberger aren't the same person. So me coaching them the same way, it might not be effective for my team. And I think that he does a good job of understanding that every single year.
Yeah, I agree. And clearly, whatever he's selling, the players are buying. Right, that's the most important thing as a head coach. You know, you can say the most outlandish thing, and it may not make any sense, but if the players believe it, that's all that matters, and they are buying what he's selling.
So, right before we leave this topic, I'm really excited about this one because I'm a big fan of Coach Tomlin, but I also made a bet with my friend. It was a $100 bet, that the Steelers would finish the season 7-9, and he's a Steelers fan, and he wouldn't believe it. So I wanted to get that one out there because I felt good about that bet. That was a dangerous one to take, but I felt good about it. All right,
One for Shazier.
All right, so Dan Campbell and the Lions, they finished 9-8. At one point this season, they were 1-6.
Yeah.
Can the Lions comeback continue in 2023?
I believe it can. And what's really interesting about that one is that they may end up winning that trade that sent Matthew Stafford to the Rams. Look, the Rams will take that trade 100 times out of 100 because it won them a Super Bowl. There's no question about it. They would not redo that trade. But if you're the Lions, you got Jared Goff, and you think, okay, we'll get another first-round pick in what should be a quarterback-rich draft, right? Well, the Rams stink this year, so suddenly that pick that they got from the Rams is way better than the Lions ever imagined it was going to be. And suddenly Jared Goff looks like he could be the answer in Detroit. By the way, he's at a very friendly quarterback contract cap situation right now because the deal he signed, his extension with the Rams, has been surpassed multiple times in terms of guaranteed dollars per year for quarterbacks. So you have a functional quarterback in Jared Goff. You have Jameson Williams, who's coming on finally at the end of the year. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's absolutely amazing. You have this kid playing tight end that they felt comfortable giving up Hawkinson for in their own division. And then you have the running back situation with Williams and Swift. Williams, by the way, just broke Barry Sanders' touchdown record in Detroit. And maybe most importantly for the Lions, I called them the Detroit Lions for a lot of the season because there was no D in Detroit. They've turned that around. This kid, James Houston, I'm sure you've been following him. They got him off the practice squad, and I think he had 7 sacks in his first 6 games, which had never happened before. Dan Campbell was all, bluster and bravado and all that stuff in Hard Knocks, and people are like, yeah. And then they start 1-6. And I'm like, see, it was all a bunch of thunder and no lightning. And suddenly, the team never left on him. Like even last year when they went 3-13-1, they had the second best record against the spread. Now, why is that important? Because it meant they weren't quitting. They weren't giving up. They were giving it everything they had. They just weren't good enough yet. Okay? Then you draft Amon-Ra, and look what he's become in his second year. Then you get the two-headed monster with Williams and Swift. You pick up, as we said, Jameson Williams. And the kid Aiden Hutchinson, my God, he has been as good as advertised. Yeah. Some of those interceptions, like the one against Aaron Rodgers, right, where people are like, how does Aaron Rodgers make that throw? Well, he's trying to throw it to Bakhtiari. I'm like, well, wait a minute now. Whenever you're a quarterback and you're trying to throw something to an offensive lineman, you throw a lollipop. You don't throw a laser in there. Guy's got hands that are like, mangled by a waffle iron. He's got padding everywhere. You want to make that as catchable as possible. What you don't expect is the rush end on the outside to read the play, give up his rush, and run around into coverage to make the interception. I mean, that was such a heads-up play for a rookie. That was so smart. So they have pressure on the outside. They have a linebacker that I think they can build around in Houston. They have a quarterback that I think is going to be on a cap-friendly deal, and they got a bunch of weapons and belief. Yeah, I think the Lions, the roar has been restored, and the Lions are going to be a problem in the NFC North going forward.
Yeah, man, that team is a dangerous team, and I think it would have been scary if they would have got into the playoffs. So I look forward to seeing what they're going to be like next year.
I mean, think about that. They had nothing to play for, and they basically told the Packers, screw you, we're ending your season. I love that.
Yeah, I love what is your motivation? We don't want them in.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. That's a competitor in somebody. So the Broncos, they've been linked to some pretty big names as replacements. Sean Payton, Jen Harbaugh. Yep. Can one of them spark this Broncos comeback next year?
Well, it's interesting, right? Like Russell Wilson has just been an anchor, and that contract is an anchor. I think they gave up 3 picks, 2 players, and $150+ million in the deal to get Russell Wilson. So, he was awful for most of this year. Let's just be honest about it. He was terrible. He went into the last few games of the season. He had more bathrooms in his house, 12, than touchdown passes, 11. So
that's crazy.
It's nuts, right? He finally got that on the right side of the equation, and I thought he played actually pretty well the last 3 games of the season. And I've been told there's a bunch of things that are going on in the background that that were causing some issues with Russell's play. If those things are straightened out, and you can get Russell to be what he was in Seattle, then that job becomes a lot more lucrative. But if Russell's going to be the guy that he was for the first 13, 14 games of the season, then it's a problem. Like, if Russell can be salvaged, the Broncos have a really good defense, and they have really good weapons on offense. You have Jerry Jeudy. You're hopefully going to get Cortland Sutton back next year and healthy. They have some very interesting weapons, but it all depends on the quarterback. If Russell can play like he did the last 4 weeks, that job is way more attractive than if Russell's going to play like he did the first 13 or 14 weeks.
Yeah, we got to see if it's more of a Russell thing or a coach thing. So
right.
We have some, interesting and, great players that got injured this year or that's, coming back from injury. Who do you think has the best chance of winning Comeback Player of the Year next year? Trey Lance, Carson Wentz, Zach Wilson, Odell Beckham, or someone else?
Well, of all those players, I'd bet on Odell because I've seen him do it before. Let's go through those other quarterbacks. The San Francisco thing is interesting, right? Because they're proving they can win with anybody at quarterback. Like, they're the only team in the league that says to their quarterback, we're good, just don't screw it up. We'll give you an opportunity to make a couple plays, but really, the defense, Christian McCaffrey, Kittle, Debo, that's the plan. You just don't screw it up, all right? And so now it's like really weird because what are you going to do? You gave up 3 first round, you gave up 3 picks to move up and get Trey Lance, and now you're winning with a guy who was the last pick of the draft. I mean, it kind of becomes very interesting. Zach, I think, needs to get the hell out of New York. And I want to be clear about Zach. None of his problems are physical, okay? Zach Wilson can make every throw. Zach didn't understand what the job was, right? Zach grew up in a tiny town in Utah, didn't go very far, went to BYU. So his bubble was very small. And then he goes to New York, where the bubble is very large. And you have to deal with a lot of people that come from different backgrounds, different scenarios, and not everybody's happy, joy to see you all the time, right?
Yeah.
Zach didn't understand that part of the job. He has all the talent in the world. He needs to like Geno needed to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Zach needs to figure it out. Like what Zach needs is Geno's wisdom. That's what he needs right now.
Geno's wisdom now.
Correct. Geno's wisdom, not when he got punched in the face by a teammate as a member of the Jets. That's what he needs now. Of all those players, I would put Odell on that list because I know he's going to be dynamic whenever he gets back on the field.
So my favorite player, and this is the end of Don't Call It a Comeback this episode, but my favorite player that I'm going to have to go with that I was very high on at the beginning of the season, I'm going to have to go with Breece Hall.
Yeah, I agree.
Breece Hall,
Ryan, at one point you can make the case that before he got hurt, the Jets probably had the offensive and defensive rookies of the year in Sauce Gardner and Breece Hall. Now, obviously, Tariq Woolen in Seattle is going to get a lot of votes as well for defensive rookie of the year. But Sauce was amazing, and Breece Hall was they were great until Breece Hall went down on offense. And Zach wasn't playing any better, but they didn't need him to play any better. I think they went 4 or 5 weeks without Zach Wilson throwing a touchdown pass, right? And they won a majority of those games because the running game was so effective and their defense was playing at an elite level. When Breece Hall went down, it sort of exposed the weaknesses that Jets offense had, specifically at quarterback. So, yeah, you can make an argument that Breece Hall might have been the most important player on that Jets team this year.
Thanks to Trey Wingo joining us today, and you can hear more from Trey with Caesars and part of the 33rd team. Make sure to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you're listening, and check us out on YouTube on the Wondery channel. And make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. See you all next week.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.